The shattering sound of a crystal glass hitting the wooden floor of Socorro, New Mexico's only church, echoed through the stunned silence. Olivia Dawson stood at the altar in her wedding gown, her trembling hands protectively cradling her slightly swollen belly as the man who had promised to love her forever turned his back and walked away. "I won't be raising another man's bastard," Walter Simmons spat, his voice carrying through the small church as he stormed down the aisle. "You made a fool of me, Olivia." It was 1875, and in the territory of New Mexico, a pregnant bride without a husband faced a future of shame and hardship. Olivia felt the blood drain from her face as Walter's accusations rang out, lies so vicious they stole her breath. The child was as she had never been with another, but his pride wouldn't let him believe it. "Walter, please," she called after him, her voice breaking. "The baby is yours." But Walter was already pushing through the church doors, leaving behind a wake of whispers and judgmental stares. Olivia's knees threatened to buckle beneath her as the reality of her situation crashed down upon her. She was 3 months pregnant, abandoned at the altar and about to become the scandal of Socorro. Then, from the back of the small gathering, a tall figure stepped forward. Patrick James had been leaning against the back wall of the church, his worn cowboy hat in his hands. He was new to town, having arrived just 2 months prior to work at the Reynolds Cattle Ranch outside Socorro. His reputation was that of a quiet, hard-working man who kept to himself, his past a mystery that fueled the town's curiosity. "I'll be your husband," he declared, his deep voice carrying across the church as he walked down the aisle toward Olivia. His blue eyes held her steadily as he approached, determination evident in every step. A collective gasp rose from the wedding guests. Olivia stared at the man in disbelief. She had seen him around town, tipping his hat politely when they passed on the street, but they had never exchanged more than pleasantries. "Mr. James," she whispered as he reached her side, "you don't have to do this." "No one should be left standing alone like this," he replied quietly, his voice for her ears only. "I'm offering you my name, madam, nothing more, nothing less, unless you want it." Reverend Thompson cleared his throat, looking between the abandoned bride and the cowboy who had stepped forward. "Mr. James, do you understand what you're proposing?" he asked cautiously. "I do," Patrick replied without hesitation. "I'm proposing marriage to Miss Dawson here and now if she'll have me." Olivia's mind raced. She looked to the front pew where her father sat, his face a mask of shock and relief. Her mother had passed 3 years prior, and her father had struggled to raise her alone. The scandal of her returning home, pregnant and unmarried, would destroy what little standing they had in the community. "Miss Dawson," Patrick prompted gently, "I know I'm not the man you plan to marry today, but I'm offering you a chance at respectability for you and your child." Olivia studied him, the sun-weathered face, the calloused hands that spoke of hard work, the kind eyes that showed no judgment. This was madness, but what choice did she have? "Yes," she whispered, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. "I accept your offer, Mr. James." And so, in a ceremony that lasted less than 10 minutes, Olivia Dawson became Olivia James. The guests watched in stunned silence as the cowboy and the pregnant bride exchanged vows, his deep voice confident, hers barely audible. When the reverend pronounced them man and wife, Patrick leaned down and whispered, "I'll take care of you both, Mrs. James. You have my word." Outside the church, Walter had already mounted his horse and ridden away, but his parents remained, faces pinched with disapproval. "You've made your bed now," Mrs. Simmons hissed as Olivia and Patrick descended the church steps. "My son was right to leave you." Patrick stepped forward, placing himself between Olivia and the bitter woman. "Your son left his responsibilities behind," he said calmly. "I suggest you do the same and leave my wife be." Mrs. Simmons recoiled as if slapped before turning away with a huff. The rest of the guests dispersed quickly, eager to spread the news of Socorro's most scandalous wedding. "My father's house isn't far," Olivia said as they stood alone on the church steps. "All my belongings are there." "I've got a small place on the edge of town," Patrick replied. "It's not much, but it's clean and solid. I'll help you get your things." The walk to her father's house was silent, the weight of what had just happened settling between them like a physical presence. Olivia couldn't help but wonder what kind of man married a pregnant stranger out of the goodness of his heart. Was he truly kind, or was there something else driving him? Her father, Thomas Dawson, had hurried ahead and was waiting for them on the porch of the modest home where Olivia had grown up. "Patrick," he said, extending his hand to the cowboy, "I don't know how to thank you." "No need for thanks, sir," Patrick replied, shaking the older man's hand firmly. "There's every need," Thomas insisted. "You've saved my daughter from disgrace." Olivia felt a flush of shame heat her cheeks. "Father, please." Thomas looked at his daughter with a mixture of love and worry. "Olivia, I know this isn't what you planned, but Mr. James seems a decent man, better than that coward Simmons proved to be." They went inside to gather Olivia's belongings. She had packed a trunk for her honeymoon, never imagining she would be taking it to a different home than planned. As she added a few more personal items to the trunk, reality began to sink in. She had married a stranger. She was going to live with him, have her baby under his roof, be known as his wife. "Are you ready?" Patrick asked from the doorway of her bedroom. He had respectfully remained downstairs until now. "As ready as I can be," Olivia replied, closing the trunk. She looked around the room that had been hers since childhood, wondering when, if ever, she would feel at home again. Patrick lifted the heavy trunk with ease. "I've got a wagon outside. Your father is loading the wedding gifts." "The gifts," Olivia murmured. She hadn't even thought of those. Would the townspeople demand them back now that she had married someone other than Walter? As if reading her thoughts, Patrick said, "They're yours, Mrs. James. Given to you on your wedding day, and you got married just like planned." There was a hint of a smile on his lips, the first she had seen. They loaded the trunk and gifts into the wagon. Olivia embraced her father, who whispered in her ear, "Give him a chance, Livy. Sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places." With that blessing, they set off for Patrick's home. The sun was setting over the mountains, casting long shadows across the desert landscape. Socorro was quiet as they passed through, though Olivia felt eyes watching from behind curtains and shutters. Patrick's home was indeed on the edge of town, a small but well-maintained cabin with a corral for horses and a modest garden out back. It was isolated enough to provide privacy, but close enough to town for convenience. "It's not much," he said as he helped her down from the wagon, "but it's home." Inside, the cabin was simple but clean. A main room served as both kitchen and living area with a wood stove, a table with 4 chairs, and a comfortable-looking armchair near the fire. 2 doors led off from the main room. "That's the bedroom," Patrick said, nodding to one door. "And a small storeroom through there. I'll sleep out here for now." Olivia felt a rush of relief, followed immediately by guilt. Of course he wouldn't expect to share a bed. This was a marriage of convenience, nothing more. "I'll bring in your trunk," he said, heading back outside. Alone for a moment, Olivia took a deep breath. This morning, she had awakened in her childhood bedroom, excited to marry Walter Simmons, the man she thought she loved. Now, as the sun set, she was Mrs. Patrick James, in a strange home with a husband she barely knew. When Patrick returned with her trunk, he set it down in the bedroom. "I'll give you some time to settle in," he said. "Are you hungry?" She realized she hadn't eaten since breakfast, too nervous about the wedding to manage more than a few bites. Now, hunger gnawed at her empty stomach. "Yes, actually." "I'll fix us something simple," he offered. "Nothing fancy, but it'll fill your belly." While Olivia unpacked her trunk, placing her clothes in the small dresser that Patrick had clearly emptied for her use, she listened to him moving about in the kitchen. The domestic sounds were comforting in their normalcy. Even if the situation was anything but normal, when she emerged from the bedroom, Patrick had set the table with a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and coffee. "Thank you," she said, taking a seat. "This looks good." They ate in silence for a few minutes, the awkwardness between them almost palpable. "We should talk about how this is going to work," Patrick finally said, setting down his cup of coffee. Olivia nodded, feeling a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. "Yes, I suppose we should." "I meant what I said in the church," he began. "I'm offering you my name and my protection. I don't expect anything from you that you're not willing to give." This is your home now, and I want you to be comfortable here. Why did you do it? Olivia asked, the question that had been burning in her mind since he had stepped forward in the church. Why marry a pregnant woman you don't even know? Patrick was quiet for a moment, considering his words. I've seen what happens to women left alone in this world, he finally said. It's not right and it's not fair. I had the power to help, so I did. That's it, just being a good Samaritan, he smiled slightly. Is that so hard to believe? In my experience, people usually want something in return for their kindness. I'm not most people, Mrs. James. Olivia, she corrected him. If we're to be husband and wife, even in name only, you should call me Olivia. Olivia, he repeated, and something about the way he said her name made her heart beat a little faster. And I'm Patrick. They finished their meal, and Patrick insisted on cleaning up while Olivia rested. She sat in the armchair by the fire, watching him work and wondering what kind of man he truly was. I have to be at the ranch early tomorrow, he told her as he dried the last plate, but I'll be back by sundown. There's food in the pantry, and Mrs. Reynolds from the ranch brings fresh milk every few days. Help yourself to anything you need. Thank you, Olivia said softly, for everything. That night, as she lay in Patrick's bed, now her bed, listening to him settle onto the makeshift bed he had created for himself in the main room, Olivia wondered what the future held for her child, and for this strange new marriage. Morning came early, with the sound of Patrick moving quietly around the cabin. Olivia lay still, pretending to be asleep as he gathered his things and slipped out the door. Only when she heard the sound of hoofbeats fading into the distance did she rise. The cabin looked different in the morning light, smaller but somehow more welcoming. She explored it fully, noting the care with which Patrick had maintained it. Everything had its place, and though the furnishings were simple, they were of good quality. In the pantry, she found a well-stocked larder with flour, sugar, coffee, and preserved fruits and vegetables. She smiled when she discovered a jar of honey, a luxury in these parts. Patrick clearly wasn't living hand to mouth. After a simple breakfast, Olivia decided to tackle the garden. Gardening had always brought her peace, and the plot behind the cabin showed promise but needed tending. It was a way to contribute to her new home and to keep her mind occupied. As she worked, pulling weeds and loosening soil around young tomato plants, she heard a wagon approaching. Looking up, she saw a woman perhaps 10 years her senior driving a small cart. "Hello there," the woman called as she brought the horse to a stop. "You must be Mrs. James. I'm Eliza Reynolds." Olivia stood, brushing dirt from her apron. "Yes, I'm Olivia James," she replied, still finding the name strange on her tongue. Eliza climbed down from the wagon, a friendly smile on her face. "I brought some milk and eggs," she said, retrieving a basket from the back of the cart, "and I wanted to welcome you properly." Olivia thanked her, touched by the gesture. "Would you like to come in for some coffee?" she offered, eager for company and information about her new husband. Inside, as they sat at the table with steaming cups before them, Eliza studied Olivia with kind eyes. "You know, the whole town's talking about yesterday," she said candidly. Olivia felt her cheeks flush. "I suppose they are. Don't you mind them," Eliza said firmly. "Most folks around here have their own skeletons they'd rather keep buried. They'll find something new to gossip about soon enough." "I hope so," Olivia murmured. "Patrick's a good man," Eliza continued. "My husband says he's the hardest worker on the ranch, keeps to himself mostly, but he's always willing to lend a hand when needed. How long has he been working for your husband?" "About 2 months now." "Came from up north somewhere, though he doesn't talk much about where exactly. Whatever his past, he's proven himself reliable." Olivia absorbed this information, adding it to the little she knew about the man she had married. Has he ever mentioned why he came to Socorro?" Eliza shook her head. "Not to me, but men like Patrick often have reasons for starting fresh somewhere new." She paused, then added gently, "Just like you're doing now." After Eliza left, promising to visit again soon, Olivia continued working in the garden until the heat of the day drove her inside. As she prepared a light meal for herself, she wondered what Patrick would like for dinner. It seemed a wifely thing to do, to have a hot meal waiting when he returned from work. By late afternoon, she had baked fresh bread and prepared a stew that simmered gently on the stove. The domestic activities helped distract her from thoughts of Walter and the humiliation of the previous day. The sun was beginning to set when she heard a horse approaching. Through the window, she watched Patrick dismount and lead his bay gelding to the small stable. He moved with easy confidence, his tall frame silhouetted against the golden light of the setting sun. When he entered the cabin, hat in hand, the smell of the stew filled the air. "Something smells good," he said, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. "I hope you're hungry," Olivia replied, suddenly nervous. "It's just a simple stew, but it smells wonderful," he assured her. "Let me just wash up." They ate together, the silence between them more comfortable than it had been the night before. Patrick complimented her cooking and told her about his day at the ranch. It was the most he had spoken since they met, and Olivia found herself studying him as he talked, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the gentle drawl in his voice that suggested he might be from somewhere in the South. "Mrs. Reynolds stopped by today," Olivia mentioned as they finished their meal. "She brought milk and eggs." Patrick nodded. "Eliza's a kind woman. Her husband's a fair boss, too. I was lucky to find work with them." "She said you've only been in Socorro for 2 months," Olivia said, trying to sound casual. "Where were you before that, if you don't mind my asking?" A shadow passed over Patrick's face so quickly Olivia almost missed it. "All over," he replied vaguely. "Never stayed in one place too long." "And what brought you to Socorro?" He met her eyes directly. "A desire to stop wandering," he said simply. Then, as if deciding to change the subject, he asked, "How are you feeling, with the baby, I mean?" Olivia's hand instinctively went to her belly. "Well enough. The morning sickness has passed, thank goodness." "That's good," he said, and then, with a slight hesitation, "When is the baby due?" "Late December, the doctor thinks," Olivia answered. "Around Christmas." Patrick nodded. "Winter babies are strong," he said, a distant look in his eyes. "My sister was born in December during the worst blizzard anyone could remember. Toughest person I ever knew." It was the first personal detail he had shared, and Olivia seized upon it. "You have a sister," he corrected quietly. "She passed 5 years ago." "I'm sorry," Olivia said softly. "I didn't mean to pry." "You're not prying," Patrick assured her. "You're my wife. You have a right to know about my family." He paused, then added, "Though there's not much to tell. My parents died when I was young. My sister raised me until I was old enough to make my own way. After she died, I started traveling." The simple story contained volumes of unspoken pain, and Olivia felt a surge of empathy for this man who had known such loss. "My mother died 3 years ago," she offered in return. "Consumption. It was just my father and me after that." Patrick's eyes softened. "It's not easy losing those you love." "No," she agreed, "it's not." After dinner, Patrick insisted on helping with the dishes, and they worked side by side in companionable silence. Later, as Olivia stitched by the fire and Patrick whittled a piece of wood, she felt a strange sense of contentment settle over her. This wasn't the life she had planned, but perhaps it could be a good one nonetheless. The days fell into a pattern after that. Patrick would leave early for the ranch, and Olivia would tend to the house and garden. In the evenings, they would share a meal and talk, gradually learning more about each other. Patrick remained somewhat guarded about his past, but each day he revealed a little more of himself. A week after their hasty marriage, Olivia ventured into town for supplies. She held her head high as she walked down the main street, aware of the whispers and stares that followed her. At the general store, Mrs. Peterson, the proprietor's wife, made a point of commenting loudly about women who trap men into marriage. Olivia was placing items in her basket, trying to ignore the barbed comments when she heard a familiar voice. "Mrs. Peterson," Patrick said, his tone polite but cool. "I'd appreciate it if you'd extend my wife the courtesy she deserves." Olivia turned to find Patrick standing in the doorway, his tall frame filling the space. She hadn't expected to see him in town during the workday. "Mr. James, Mrs. Peterson stammered, clearly surprised by his appearance. "I didn't mean any offense." I'm sure you didn't, he replied, though his expression suggested otherwise. He moved to Olivia's side, placing a protective hand at the small of her back. You have everything you need, Olivia. She nodded, touched by his public defense of her. Then let's settle up and be on our way, he said, taking the basket from her and adding a few items of his own before carrying it to the counter. Outside the store, Olivia asked, "What are you doing in town? I thought you'd be at the ranch." "Mr. Reynolds sent me to pick up some supplies," Patrick explained. "I saw you heading into the store and thought I'd check on you." He paused, then added, "I was concerned about how you'd be treated." "It's nothing I didn't expect," Olivia said with a sigh. "That doesn't make it right," Patrick replied firmly. "You're my wife now, and no one has the right to treat you with disrespect." Something in his voice, a fierce protectiveness, made Olivia's heart flutter. "Thank you for standing up for me," she said softly. Patrick looked down at her, his blue eyes intense. "Always," he promised. They walked together to where her father's old mare was hitched, Patrick carrying her purchases. As he helped secure them to the saddle, his hand brushed hers, and Olivia felt a jolt of awareness that surprised her. This man, this near stranger she had married out of necessity, was becoming something more to her with each passing day. "Will you be all right getting home?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "I'll be fine," she assured him. "I've been riding since I was a child." He nodded, but still helped her mount, his strong hands gentle as they guided her into the saddle. "I'll be home by sundown," he told her. "I'll have supper waiting," she replied, feeling oddly like a real wife in that moment. As she rode home, Olivia reflected on the changes in her life. Walter's rejection still stung, but the pain was fading, replaced by a growing curiosity about an attraction to Patrick. She wondered if he felt it too, this slow-building connection between them. That evening, as they ate the rabbit stew Olivia had prepared, Patrick seemed deep in thought. "Is everything all right?" she finally asked. He looked up, as if surprised by the question. "Yes, just thinking about the future," he replied. "With the baby coming in December, we should start preparing. The bedroom isn't very big, but I thought I could add on a small nursery." Olivia was touched by his consideration. "You do that, of course," he said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world to build an addition for another man's child. "Every baby needs a place of its own." "Patrick," Olivia began, then hesitated, unsure how to express what she was feeling. "You've done so much already. You don't have to take on more responsibility." He regarded her steadily across the table. "When I married you, Olivia, I accepted all that came with you, including your child. I won't be a father in name only." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes at his words. "The baby isn't Walter's," she confessed suddenly, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "It's not another man's child." Patrick's brow furrowed in confusion. "But Walter said—" "Walter lied," Olivia interrupted, anger flaring at the memory. "When I told him I was pregnant, he accused me of being with someone else. He couldn't accept that the timing meant we had been together before our engagement was official. His family is very religious, and he was afraid of what they would think. So he abandoned you and his own child rather than face his family's disapproval." Patrick's voice was tight with controlled anger. Olivia nodded, wiping away a tear. "He said no one would believe the baby was his, that I would ruin his reputation. So he created a lie to protect himself and destroy me instead." Patrick's hands clenched into fists on the table. "That coward," he muttered. "If I ever see him again, please," Olivia pleaded, reaching across to touch his hand. "It doesn't matter now. What's done is done." He looked down at her small hand covering his larger one, and slowly his fingers uncurled. "You're right," he said softly. "What matters is that you and the baby are safe now. Because of you," she reminded him. Their eyes met across the table, and something shifted between them, a deepening of trust, a strengthening of the bond that was forming day by day. Later that night, as Olivia prepared for bed, she heard Patrick moving about in the main room. Curious, she opened the bedroom door to find him at the table, sketching by lamplight. "What are you doing?" she asked. He looked up, a slight smile on his lips. "Planning the nursery," he explained, showing her the rough drawings he had made. Olivia moved closer, leaning over his shoulder to see the detailed plans. You're quite the artist, she remarked, impressed by the precision of his work. Just something I picked up along the way, he said modestly. My sister taught me the basics of drafting, said it was a useful skill for a man to have. She was right, Olivia agreed. Then, noticing the way he had laid out the addition, she pointed to the drawing. If you put a window here, the morning light would be beautiful for the baby. Patrick considered her suggestion, then nodded, adding the window to his sketch. Good idea. Every child should wake up to sunlight. They continued like that for a while, Olivia offering suggestions, Patrick incorporating them into his plans. It was the most natural interaction they had shared yet, and Olivia felt herself relaxing fully in his presence for the first time. When she finally returned to the bedroom, leaving Patrick still working on his plans, Olivia found herself smiling. Perhaps this marriage of convenience was becoming something more than either of them had expected. The next few weeks brought a noticeable change in their relationship. Patrick began work on the nursery addition, spending his days off cutting and preparing lumber, his strong hands skillfully shaping the wood into the beginnings of a room. Olivia would bring him water and food, watching him work with growing admiration. One Saturday, as Patrick was setting the framework for the nursery walls, Olivia's father came to visit. Thomas Dawson watched his son-in-law work for a while before rolling up his sleeves and offering to help. I may be getting on in years, he told Patrick, but I still know how to swing a hammer. The two men worked side by side, and Olivia, watching from the garden where she was harvesting late summer vegetables, felt a surge of gratitude. Her father had accepted Patrick as family without hesitation, treating him with the respect and warmth he would have shown a son of his choosing. That evening, after Thomas had gone home with a basket of garden produce and the promise to return the following weekend, Patrick and Olivia sat on the small porch he had built when he first moved into the cabin. Your father's a good man, Patrick commented, sipping a cup of coffee. He taught you well. He did his best after Mother died, Olivia agreed. It wasn't easy for him raising a daughter alone. You turned out just fine, Patrick said with a warm glance that made Olivia's cheeks heat. The night air was cool and Olivia shivered slightly. Without a word, Patrick removed his jacket and draped it around her shoulders. The weight of it, still warm from his body, enveloped her in his scent leather sawdust and something uniquely Patrick. Thank you, she murmured, pulling the jacket closer around her. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Olivia was acutely aware of Patrick beside her, his presence both reassuring and exciting in a way she had never experienced with Walter. Olivia, Patrick began hesitantly, breaking the silence. There's something I've been meaning to ask you. Yes, she encouraged when he paused. I know our marriage wasn't what you planned, he said, his voice low, and I've tried to give you space to not pressure you in any way. But I want you to know that, if you ever wanted this to be more than an arrangement of convenience. He trailed off, and Olivia's heart raced at the implication of his words. Was he saying what she thought he was saying? Patrick, she said softly, turning to face him. Are you asking if I might want a real marriage? In the dim light from the lamp inside the cabin, she saw his Adam's apple bob as he swallowed hard. Yes, he admitted. That's exactly what I'm asking. Olivia took a deep breath, gathering her courage. I think, she said slowly, that I would like that very much. Patrick's eyes widened, hope and disbelief warring in his expression. You would? Yes, she confirmed, more certain now. These past weeks, getting to know you, you're a good man, Patrick James. A far better man than the one I thought I loved. He reached for her hand, his calloused fingers gentle as they entwined with hers. I never expected to find someone like you, he confessed. When I came to Socorro, I was just looking for a place to work, to maybe put down some roots. I never thought I'd find a wife, a family. And I never thought I'd find happiness after Walter left me at the altar, Olivia replied. But here we are. Patrick's free hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch reverent. May I kiss you, Olivia? He asked, his voice husky with emotion. In answer, she leaned forward, closing the distance between them. His lips met hers in a kiss that was gentle at first, then deepened as she responded, her hand coming up to rest against his chest. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Patrick rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do right by you," he whispered. "By you and the baby." "You already have," Olivia assured him, her heart full to bursting with newfound feelings for this man who had rescued her in more ways than one. That night, for the first time, Patrick joined Olivia in the bedroom they would now truly share as husband and wife. Their lovemaking was tender and unhurried, a mutual exploration and celebration of the bond that had formed between them. Afterward, as Olivia lay in the circle of Patrick's arms, her head resting on his chest, she felt a sense of rightness that had been missing from her relationship with Walter. This was what love should feel like, she realized, safe, passionate, and built on mutual respect. "What are you thinking?" Patrick asked, his fingers trailing gently up and down her arm. "That sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead to the best," she replied honestly. "If Walter hadn't left me at the altar, I wouldn't be here with you now." Patrick pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "His loss is my gain," he said, his voice rumbling in his chest beneath her ear. "And I intend to make sure you never regret choosing me." "I already don't," Olivia assured him, snuggling closer into his embrace. As September gave way to October, the nursery took shape, becoming a bright, cheerful room adjoining the main bedroom. Patrick crafted a beautiful crib, working on it in the evenings after returning from the ranch. Olivia sewed curtains and a quilt, preparing for the baby that would arrive in just a few months. The town's attitude toward them began to shift as well. It was hard to maintain disapproval in the face of such obvious devotion between the two. Eliza Reynolds became a frequent visitor and staunch supporter, often bringing other ranch wives to call on Olivia. Slowly, she was accepted into their circle, her past scandal fading in importance. One crisp October afternoon, Olivia was hanging laundry on the line behind the cabin when she heard a horse approaching. Expecting it to be Patrick returning early from the ranch, she turned with a smile that quickly faded when she saw Walter Simmons dismounting from his horse. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, one hand protectively covering her now prominent belly. Walter looked haggard, his once handsome face drawn and unshaven. "I came to talk to you," he said, taking a step toward her. Olivia stood her ground, though her heart hammered in her chest. "There's nothing to talk about, Walter. You made your choice months ago." "I made a mistake," he admitted, his voice cracking. "I was scared, Olivia, scared of what people would think of being a father before I was ready, but I've regretted it every day since." "It's too late," Olivia said firmly. "I'm married now." Walter's eyes darted to her wedding ring, then to her swollen belly. "To that cowboy," he spat. "A man you barely knew, a man who stood by me when you wouldn't," Olivia corrected him. "A man who has proven himself to be everything you are not," anger flashed in Walter's eyes. "He's raising my child," he hissed, stepping closer. "A child you denied was yours," Olivia reminded him, backing away. "A child you called a bastard in front of the entire town." "I was wrong," Walter insisted. "I know that now, that's why I've come back to make things right." "There's nothing to make right," Olivia said, wishing Patrick would return. "Please leave, Walter." Instead of leaving, Walter reached for her arm. "You can't just dismiss me, Olivia. That's my baby you're carrying." Before Olivia could respond, a deep voice cut through the air. "Take your hand off my wife." They both turned to see Patrick dismounting from his horse, his expression thunderous. He strode toward them, every line of his body radiating controlled fury. Walter released Olivia's arm but stood his ground. "This is between me and Olivia," he said, though his voice wavered slightly in the face of Patrick's anger. "Anything concerning my wife concerns me," Patrick replied, reaching Olivia's side and placing a protective arm around her waist. "Especially when it involves a man who publicly humiliated her and abandoned his own child." Walter's face flushed. "I made a mistake," he repeated. "I'm here to rectify it. By trespassing on my property and frightening my wife." Patrick's voice was dangerously calm. "That's not rectifying anything, Simmons. That's making things worse." Olivia leaned into Patrick's solid presence, drawing strength from him. Walter was just leaving, she said firmly. Walter looked between them, his expression hardening. This isn't over, he warned. That's my child and I have rights. Rights you forfeited when you walked out of that church, Patrick reminded him. Now, I suggest you get back on your horse and ride away before I forget my manners. The threat in his voice was unmistakable, and Walter, after a moment of tense silence, backed down. He mounted his horse with as much dignity as he could muster, then looked down at Olivia one last time. I'll be back, he promised, before spurring his horse and riding away. Once he was gone, Patrick turned to Olivia, concern replacing the anger in his eyes. Are you all right? He asked, his hands gently running over her arms as if checking for injuries. I'm fine, she assured him, though she was shaking slightly. He didn't hurt me, he just surprised me. Patrick pulled her into a tight embrace, one hand cradling the back of her head. I'm sorry I wasn't here, he murmured into her hair. You came when I needed you, Olivia replied, her voice muffled against his chest. They stood like that for a long moment until Olivia's trembling subsided. Then, still keeping one arm around her, Patrick led her back to the cabin. Inside, he sat her down at the table and poured her a glass of water. Drink, he instructed gently. It'll help. Olivia sipped the cool water, watching as Patrick paced the small kitchen, his brow furrowed in thought. What do you think he'll do? She asked when she had finished the water. Patrick sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't know, he admitted, but we'll be ready whatever it is. That evening, after a quiet dinner, Patrick went to his saddlebag and withdrew a document. I wasn't going to show you this yet, he said, returning to the table where Olivia sat. But after today, I think you should see it. He handed her the paper, and Olivia scanned it quickly, her eyes widening as she realized what it was. A formal adoption document, Patrick nodded. I spoke to Judge Harris last week. Since Walter publicly denied the child was his and then abandoned you both, the judge agreed that I could legally adopt the baby once it's born, if you're willing, of course. Tears filled Olivia's eyes at this evidence of Patrick's commitment to her and her child. Of course I'm willing, she said, her voice choked with emotion. But what if Walter contests it? He can try, Patrick said grimly. But he'd have to prove paternity, and after his public denial, that would be difficult. Besides, the judge is inclined to favor the man who stepped up rather than the one who ran away. Olivia rose from her chair and moved to embrace Patrick, her arms wrapping around his waist. Thank you, she whispered against his chest, for thinking of everything, for protecting us both. Patrick tilted her face up to his eyes serious. I love you, Olivia, he said softly. I think I started falling for you the moment I saw you standing alone at that altar, so brave despite everything. I will always protect you and our child. It was the first time he had spoken of love, and Olivia felt her heart swell with joy. I love you too, she replied, standing on tiptoe to press her lips to his. More than I ever thought possible. Their kiss was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. Patrick pulled away reluctantly, his expression wary. Stay here, he instructed, moving to answer the door with a hand resting on the pistol at his hip. When he opened the door, it was not Walter standing there, but Sheriff Jenkins, his expression grave. Evening, Patrick, he said, nodding respectfully. Madam, he added, tipping his hat to Olivia, who had moved to stand behind her husband despite his instruction to stay put. Sheriff, Patrick greeted him cautiously. What brings you out this way after dark? Got a complaint from Walter Simmons, Jenkins said, his tone suggesting he wasn't particularly impressed by the complaint. Says you threatened him when he came to visit his fiancé. Ex-fiancé, Patrick corrected firmly. Olivia is my wife now, as you well know, Sheriff. And Simmons wasn't visiting, he was trespassing and harassing my wife while I wasn't home. Jenkins nodded, as if this confirmed what he had already suspected. That's about what I figured, he said. But I had to check, being as he's from one of the founding families and all. And what exactly did he claim I did? Patrick asked, his arm going around Olivia's waist protectively. Said you threatened to shoot him if he came back, Jenkins replied, a hint of amusement in his voice. Did you? Not in those exact words, Patrick said carefully. But I did make it clear he wasn't welcome here. The sheriff nodded again. Well, I'll tell him I looked into it and found nothing to support his claim of being threatened, and I'll advise him to stay away from your property and your wife." He paused, then added, "Between us, the Simmons boy has always been trouble. His daddy's influence has kept him out of my jail more than once." "We appreciate your understanding, Sheriff," Olivia said softly. Jenkins touched the brim of his hat again. "Just doing my job, madam." "You folks have a good evening." After the sheriff had gone, Patrick closed and bolted the door. "I don't think Walter will give up that easily," he said, his expression troubled. "No," Olivia agreed. "He never could accept defeat." They spent a restless night, both listening for sounds of Walter returning. By morning, Patrick had made a decision. "I'm going to speak with Mr. Reynolds today," he told Olivia over breakfast. "See if I can take a few days off to stay home with you until this blows over." "You don't have to do that," Olivia protested. "We need the income, especially with the baby coming. We have savings," Patrick assured her, "and your safety is more important than a few days' wages." Before Olivia could argue further, there was another knock at the door. They exchanged worried glances, and Patrick moved to answer it, his hand again near his weapon. It was Thomas Dawson, his expression concerned. "Morning, Patrick, Olivia," he greeted them. "I ran into Sheriff Jenkins in town. He told me about Walter's visit yesterday." "Come in, Father," Olivia invited, relieved to see a friendly face. Once inside, Thomas didn't waste time on pleasantries. "I heard Walter was making trouble claiming rights to the baby." "He is," Patrick confirmed grimly, "though he has no legal standing." Thomas nodded. "That's what I thought." "Well, I've come to offer my help. I can stay here with Olivia during the day while you're at work, Patrick. No one will bother her with me around." Patrick and Olivia exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. "That would ease my mind considerably, sir," Patrick said finally. "If you're sure it's not too much trouble." "No trouble at all," Thomas assured them. "I've been meaning to spend more time with my daughter anyway, and I can help with preparations for the baby." The arrangement proved to be a blessing. With Thomas at the cabin during the day, Olivia felt safe, and Patrick could work without constant worry. Thomas also proved to be handy with a hammer, helping Patrick finish the nursery on the weekends. Walter made one more attempt to see Olivia, approaching the cabin a week after his first visit. But finding Thomas there, shotgun in hand, he quickly retreated. After that, they heard rumors that he had left town for a while, heading to Santa Fe on business. As November arrived, bringing cooler temperatures and the promise of winter, Olivia's pregnancy advanced to its final stages. The baby was active, kicking and moving so much that Patrick could feel it when he placed his hand on Olivia's belly in the evenings. "Strong little one," he would comment proudly, as if the child were already his own. One chilly November evening, as they sat by the fire, Olivia working on a tiny gown for the baby while Patrick read a book, she asked a question that had been on her mind. "Have you thought about names for the baby?" Patrick looked up from his book, a smile spreading across his face. "I have actually, but I wasn't sure if you'd want my input." "Of course I do," Olivia assured him. "This is your child too, in all the ways that matter." Patrick set his book aside, his expression thoughtful. "If it's a boy, I thought maybe Thomas, after your father," he suggested. "And if it's a girl, perhaps Margaret, after my sister." Olivia's heart swelled at his thoughtfulness. "Thomas Patrick for a boy," she amended, "and Margaret Olivia for a girl." "Perfect," Patrick agreed, his eyes shining with love and anticipation. As December approached, the weather turned colder, and Patrick spent his free time chopping and stacking wood to ensure they would stay warm through the winter. The cabin was cozy, the nursery complete and waiting for its occupant. Olivia's time was near, and Dr. Mitchell had begun stopping by regularly to check on her progress. "Everything looks good," he assured them during his visit in early December. "The baby is in the right position, and you're healthy, Mrs. James. I expect a smooth delivery when the time comes." Patrick, who had stayed home for the doctor's visit, visibly relaxed at this news. He had been increasingly protective as Olivia's due date approached, spending every possible moment at her side. On December 20th, just as a light snow began to fall, a rare occurrence in Socorro, Olivia felt the first contractions. She was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, when the pain gripped her, causing her to gasp and grab the edge of the table for support. Patrick was at her side in an instant, his face a mask of concern. "Is it time?" Olivia nodded, unable to speak as another contraction washed over her. Patrick helped her to the bedroom, his movements careful and deliberate despite the panic she could see in his eyes. "I'll fetch the doctor," he said once he had her settled comfortably on the bed. "Your father is already on his way. I sent word this morning when you said you were feeling different." "Hurry," Olivia whispered, gripping his hand tightly. "I don't think this baby is going to wait very long." Patrick pressed a kiss to her forehead before rushing out. Olivia heard him galloping away, and then she was alone with her pain and the knowledge that her child was finally coming into the world. The contractions increased in frequency and intensity, and Olivia found herself wishing for her mother's presence. She had seen births before, had even assisted the midwife with a few, but experiencing it firsthand was entirely different. Thomas arrived before Patrick returned with the doctor, his face flushed from his hurried journey. "Olivia, my girl," he said, taking her hand. "How are you faring?" "I've been better," she managed through gritted teeth as another contraction gripped her. Her father's presence was a comfort, though there was little he could do beyond offering moral support. When the door finally opened to admit Patrick and Dr. Mitchell, Olivia nearly wept with relief. "Let's have a look," the doctor said briskly, rolling up his sleeves while Patrick hovered anxiously nearby. What followed was the most challenging and yet most rewarding experience of Olivia's life. For hours she labored, Patrick at her side, holding her hand and murmuring encouragement even as she crushed his fingers and cried out in pain. "You're the strongest woman I know," he told her repeatedly. "You can do this, Olivia. I'm right here with you." As midnight approached, Dr. Mitchell announced that it was time to push. Olivia, exhausted but determined, gathered her remaining strength for the final effort. "I can see the head," the doctor reported. "One more big push, Mrs. James." With a cry that seemed to come from the depths of her soul, Olivia pushed, and suddenly the pain was replaced by an indescribable feeling of release and joy as her child slid into the world. "It's a boy," Dr. Mitchell announced, holding up the squalling infant for them to see. "A healthy baby boy." Tears streamed down Olivia's face as the doctor placed the swaddled newborn in her arms. She looked down at her son, their son, taking in his red, wrinkled face, and the shock of dark hair that could have come from either her or Patrick. "Thomas Patrick James," she whispered, looking up at Patrick, who was staring at the baby with undisguised awe. "Your son." Patrick's eyes, when they met hers, were filled with tears. "Our son," he corrected gently, reaching out to touch the baby's tiny hand with one finger. "He's perfect, Olivia." Just like his mother. Thomas, who had been waiting outside during the delivery, was invited in to meet his grandson. The older man's weathered face softened as he looked down at the newborn who bore his name. "He's a fine boy," he declared, his voice rough with emotion. "A true blessing." The days that followed were a blur of joy and exhaustion as Olivia and Patrick adjusted to life with their newborn son. Young Thomas proved to have a healthy set of lungs and a hearty appetite, keeping them both busy around the clock. Patrick took 2 weeks off from the ranch, Mr. Reynolds being understanding of the new father's desire to be with his family. During that time, he proved to be an attentive and involved parent, changing diapers, walking the floor with a fussy Thomas in the middle of the night, and supporting Olivia in every way possible. On Christmas Day, a week after Thomas's birth, they received visitors. Eliza and John Reynolds came bearing gifts for the baby, as did several of the women from town who had gradually accepted Olivia into their social circle. Even Sheriff Jenkins stopped by with a hand-carved wooden horse for when the boy's a bit older. The most unexpected visitor, however, was Judge Harris, who arrived in the afternoon with official papers in hand. "I thought I'd save you a trip into town," he explained, presenting Patrick with the finalized adoption documents. "Especially in this weather." A light snow was falling again, dusting Socorro with a rare white Christmas. Inside the cabin, warmed by the fire and the presence of friends, Olivia felt a contentment she had never known before. As she watched Patrick proudly show off their son to their visitors, she reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. What had begun as the worst day of her life, abandoned and humiliated at the altar, had led to the best days she had ever known. That night, after their guests had gone and Thomas was sleeping peacefully in his crib in the nursery, Patrick and Olivia sat before the fire, her head resting on his shoulder. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. "A Christmas gift." He handed her a small box, and inside Olivia found a delicate gold locket. When she opened it, she gasped at the tiny portrait inside, a perfect miniature painting of young Thomas. "How did you?" she began, looking up at Patrick in wonder. "Eliza's cousin is an artist," he explained. "I had her come by last week while you were napping. She worked from a sketch I made." "It's beautiful," Olivia said, touched beyond words by the thoughtful gift. "Thank you." Patrick helped her put on the locket, his fingers gentle as they fastened the clasp at the nape of her neck. "I have something else for you too," he said, his voice suddenly serious. From his other pocket, he withdrew a folded piece of paper. Olivia opened it, confused at first by what appeared to be a deed. "I bought your father's house," Patrick explained when she looked up questioningly. "He's been talking about moving to Santa Fe to live with your aunt, but he was worried about selling the house to strangers. You bought our family home." Olivia was stunned by this unexpected development. Patrick nodded. "I thought we might want a bigger place eventually, especially if Thomas gets a brother or sister someday, and I know how much that house means to you." Olivia felt tears welling up again, happy tears this time. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "Except that I love you more each day, Patrick James." He gathered her into his arms, pressing a kiss to her lips. "And I love you, Olivia James. You and Thomas are my world now." They sat together in the quiet of the Christmas night, listening to the soft sounds of their sleeping son and the occasional pop of the fire. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering Socorro in a blanket of white, while inside, wrapped in the warmth of their love, a family that had begun in the most unexpected way celebrated their first Christmas together. Walter Simmons never returned to Socorro. They heard through town gossip that he had taken a job in Santa Fe and eventually married a banker's daughter there. His claims to Thomas were never pursued, perhaps because he found a new life, or perhaps because the legal adoption had made any such claims futile. Thomas Dawson did move to Santa Fe the following spring, though he visited often, doting on his grandson and approving of the loving home Patrick and Olivia provided. The James family did eventually move into the Dawson family home, expanding it as their family grew to include a daughter, Margaret Olivia, born 2 years after Thomas, and another son, William, who arrived 2 years after that. Patrick continued to work for the Reynolds Ranch, eventually becoming the foreman and later a partner in the business. Olivia found her place in Socorro society, the scandal of her first wedding day long forgotten as she became known for her kindness, her garden, and the love story that had begun with a rejection and ended with a love stronger than anyone could have imagined. On their 5th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch of the expanded Dawson home, watching their children play in the yard, Patrick took Olivia's hand in his. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Marrying me that day?" Olivia looked at him, this man who had given her a life filled with love and security, who had stepped forward when no one else would, who had become a true father to her children and the love of her life. "Never," she replied without hesitation. "It was the best decision I ever made." Patrick's smile, warm and genuine, was the same one that had captured her heart gradually over those first difficult months. "Mine too," he said simply, bringing her hand to his lips. "Mine too." And as the sun set over Socorro, painting the sky in brilliant shades of red and gold, the cowboy who had stepped forward to marry a pregnant bride rejected by her groom held his wife's hand and counted his blessings, knowing that sometimes the greatest acts of courage lead to the greatest happiness of all.